Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is an award-winning mezzo-soprano soloist and recording artist. She premiered works by more than 40 composers and made 9 critically acclaimed recordings. She's the author of 2 books about music, exploring 20th-century vocal music and the performing life, A Singer's Guide to Survival. In addition, she established a long tenure as professor of music at Austin Peay State University, where she received the university's highest awards for creativity and for teaching. The Postmaster's Daughter is her first novel. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Sharon Mabry.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Sharon, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
Well, I was a professional singer and traveled around the United States and in Europe, and was also a full-time teacher at Austin Peay starting in 1970. And so for many years, I did that. And I also wrote articles, many articles for the Nats Journal of Singing on contemporary music, because that's what I specialized in. And so in the year 2000, I decided that I would write a book about the unusual notations that people have to use when they're singing contemporary music, because there was not a book out there at all to help with that. And I would get lots of letters and emails from composers and from singers who wanted to know how to do it, and I was doing it. So I sent out 3 chapters of the book to 4 publishers, not expecting to hear from any of them. And I did hear from all of them. One wanted to turn it into a video, which I didn't want. One wanted to make it a sort of a classroom text, which it didn't fit at all. The third one wanted to do it, but said it would be 3 years before they could do it because they only did 2 books a year. And the fourth one was Oxford University Press, which I really thought would be the last one to write me back. But they called me and said they wanted to publish it. And so I went with Oxford University Press, and the book looks like this. And it's called Exploring 20th Century Music. So it's basically a guide to how to laugh on pitch and do all kinds of things that composers who are writing today use, and singers don't necessarily learn how to do.
Well, that's exciting for you to leave that kind of legacy to the music world.
Well, it's been interesting because the book is used as a text for some graduate classes, and I've done some Zoom sessions with graduate classes at the University of Oklahoma and other places, because they're reading the book and they're trying out some of these unusual things that I have in the book. So I think it's been a good guide for some folks who really are interested, but it's a very targeted audience. And since it was published by Oxford, they have that targeted audience. They have their own magazines where they publish their new books and so forth. And so I really didn't have to do much with that book because they were doing it, targeting the audience I was trying to reach.
Well, and then you had a second book about music.
Yes. As I say, I traveled around for 40 years. And as I traveled, I kept a journal of all of the places that I went and the people I saw, the things I did, the things I ate. And I decided that it would be time to write all of that down because people kept telling me, you need to tell them how you survived with allergies and being sick and all kinds of things, missing airplanes, getting to hotel rooms that didn't exist. And so this book, The Performing Life, A Singer's Guide to Survival, is a combination of advice to help young singers know what to do, what not to do. And then the second half of it is actual little vignettes about crazy things that happened to me and to my accompanist. And by the way, she also kept a journal as we were going through. I never thought I would do anything with it, but it turned out to be a fun thing to do. And I've received lots of letters from young singers who have said this has been a big help. And that's really what I was hoping for.
Well, I'm sure that it has to be, because if you're going out on tour and you've never been before, that book of advice would certainly be most helpful.
Yes, I think so. And it's especially helpful in relationships because the music world is a small world, believe it or not. So if you go out to an audition and you do something that's really not expected, or you sing the wrong repertoire, that will get around to other auditions that you do. And so it's important to let young singers know what's expected, what kind of dresses they should wear, how they should greet people, the very basic kinds of things, and what they can do for publicity, how they can promote themselves, which most of us hate doing, but it's very helpful to them to do that. Mm-hmm.
Does music or being a performer influence your writing?
You know, I was speaking to the Library Society lately, and a person asked me that, and I said to them, I have no idea. And unfortunately, I really have never thought about it that way. The only way that this particular novel has one musician in it who plays in a bluegrass band. I actually had a distant cousin who played mandolin in a bluegrass band. And so that's the only music in this novel that I have out right now. But of course, in the other books, they were all about music.
Well, I just wonder if your prose is also lyrical because of your musical background.
Well, it's certainly possible that it is. It wasn't a conscious effort to do that. But I suppose that if you're in one area of the arts, it probably automatically influences the other areas that you're in.
Well, let's talk about your new novel. I think writing fiction is a whole different animal, isn't it?
It really is. I have always been interested in fiction. And of course, over the years, I read many, many, many books. Mysteries were my favorite thing to read. And I never had time to indulge the writing of mysteries until I retired. I retired last May from Austin Peay after having taught there 52 years. And so I didn't write the book since then. I actually started this book way back in 1992, 30 years ago. I was on a tour of Virginia with my accompanist. We were singing in several different venues, and I was starting on this book. And so I read a little bit of it to her, and she said, "Oh, I think you should do something with that. I want to find out what happens." Well, I wrote 5 chapters and put them in a drawer and left them for 10 years. And then I sent them to a friend who was a colleague in the English department here at Austin Peay. And he read 2 versions of it, and he said, "You really have to do something with this book." So I put it back in the drawer because I was so busy doing other things. And it wasn't until I knew that I was going to retire that the fall before I said, it's time to do something with this book. So I sent a query to Thorncraft Publishers, who were recommended to me by a good friend and by a couple of writers, because they particularly specialize in women writers. And I was interested in that because I had specialized in women composers as a singer. I wanted to promote the music of women. So I sent a query to her, and she wrote back immediately and said, "Send the whole book." And she wrote back a week later and said, "I want to publish it." And I think it was just a perfect fit. It seemed to be. She was from the South, and she understood the characters, and it seemed to fit her ideas.
What was your inspiration for this book?
Well, I think that when I was a child, I always read novels, and I always loved to make up stories, and I always kept a diary. And I had a dog, and one of the main characters in this story is Lila Mae Putnam, who's 12 years old, who's kind of propels the story along. And she has a dog named Maxie, and her dog is actually my dog. My dog was not named Maxie. It was named Mouton, but I sort of got interested in writing a book to see where she could go with this story. The story really is about 2 powerful families, Veej and Delbert Putnam, and Eunice and Jack Cantrell. And there are other characters like Sheriff Jed Taggart and his beloved aunt Ethel, who help solve the crimes. But Lila Mae is really the one that moves the story along and gives it heart, I think.
Well, did real people inspire any of your characters?
Yes, of course, I grew up in East Tennessee, and I'm used to hearing the accents and eating the food, and I know how they live and how they work. But my mother was a fantastic cook. She was the greatest Southern cook I've ever known. And she definitely influenced Aunt Ethel, who is a main character in the book, because Aunt Ethel is an incredible cook. And every Wednesday, she and Jed, who is her nephew, they get together and work about these crimes and eat. And I talk about the Southern food that they eat. So that influenced Aunt Ethel, as well as the fact that she collected antique glass. And my mother's house looked like an antique shop. She had antique glassware everywhere on every shelf. And so that definitely did that. There are some family names actually in the book that are members of my mother's family and my father's family. The name Veej is an unusual name. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone else named Veej, but she was a relative of my father. And Mary Nell is another one. She was a relative of my mother. So there are some names, and Molly is in there, who is a sister of Lila Mae. So some of those people and the way that they lived certainly influenced the story, though the story is completely fiction.
I know that you read mysteries and loved mysteries, but was it difficult for you to construct a mystery and leave all the little breadcrumbs that you have to leave and all the clues along the way?
It was difficult. And of course, I did it kind of in 3 segments, kind of 10 years apart, so to speak, because it took me a while to have time to finish it. But yes, tying up all the loose ends is such an important part of a mystery. And I have never enjoyed reading mysteries where I knew who did it early on. That never interested me. So I wanted people to not know who did it until the very end. And I still have people writing to me and saying that it kept them reading until the very end. They didn't know who did it. So that makes me happy. That was the most important thing to me, was to make sure that it kept them reading till the end.
Well, Sharon, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the passages you brought to share today, and then read from your book so we can hear your tone and voice.
Well, I have a few sections. One is about Lila May, and it happens early in the novel, in the very first chapter, and this gives you a little bit, I guess it introduces you to Lila May and the event that would change her life forever. Some nights, Lila May Putnam would wake to a room full of screaming girls and boys, only to have them vanish. She would stand for what seemed like hours, going over shifting memories and fading pictures of that awful day and what came after it. But the memory that would never fade was the sight of her beautiful, loving sister, her best friend in all of time, the only one who really cared, floating face down in the pond. From that deliberate and cruel moment, Lila May's existence would become a surreal picture of what might have been. Her truly spoken life was changed forever. But little girls can't know those things. They just have to appear in the course of living, and Lila's certainly did. I have another one that is about Eunice Cantrell. She plays a large role in the plot of this story. And here's a section about where she comes from and what she's like. Eunice Cantrell had never been pretty. She was what people called a handsome woman. All the women in her family were the same: strong, intelligent, highly educated, and very handsome. They married well. It was expected that they would. They walked slowly with a dignified air. They knew how to greet people as if their station in life had been determined at the beginning of time. When Eunice was a little girl, her father had told her exactly what her life would be someday. He sat her down on a bench in the elaborate garden on the grounds of the Philadelphia estate and told her what would be expected of her when she grew up to be a young woman and beyond. He explained that there were responsibilities to live up to and promises to keep, and that the women in her family had always enjoyed the rewards brought about by family tradition. She would be no exception. When he died, he left her and her sister equal portions of his entire fortune, a fortune that could buy Jack Cantrell and his holdings 3 times over. These facts were little comfort to Eunice now. She had traveled around the world more than once, been a guest at the White House, and enjoyed sophisticated conversation with some of the most significant figures in politics and the arts. But these memories were no consolation for the losses she had suffered. Eunice had never belonged in Selby, Tennessee. This place was foreign to every part of her body.
Those are both great scenes, great characterizations.
Well, thank you. I have another one about her husband. In my novel, Jack Cantrell, her husband, is extremely wealthy, and I've always been fascinated with cars, fancy cars, one-of-a-kind cars. And so I wanted him to have a car collection, and one that someone who had all the money in the world would buy. So I called one of my friends who was an antique car buff and who has written a book on cars, Dr. John Butler. And he gave me a list of some cars that he thought someone would have in 1937. And so I got on the internet and I looked at them, wanted them all. And I came up with a car collection that Jack Cantrell has. And it's important in the book. It's actually a character in the book because the cars give you an idea of what he wants to drive on a certain day according to how he feels. Jack backed the Auburn Speedster out of the shed and let the engine idle for a few minutes as he looked out over the luxurious green expanse between the house and the main road. Then he slowly turned the car toward the estate's main gate. He'd spent half an hour deciding which car to take out today, touching each one, sitting in 3 of them, and then ultimately only the Auburn felt right in his hands. After all, it had been taken through its paces at a 24-hour endurance run in the Bonneville Salt Flats out in Utah. So he knew it had been proved capable of exceeding 100 miles per hour, an appealing feature for a day like this. It was a low-slung convertible with teardrop headlamps, chrome exhaust pipes, pontoon fenders, an engine designed by Duesenberg, and above all, it was masculine. It was Jack Cantrell. It had a presence that symbolized power and style in a package that couldn't be missed or mistaken for weakness. The mere sight of it raised expectations and guaranteed immediate attention from anyone who came in view of it. The afternoon was calm and sunny, with only a slight breeze blowing through the line of trees that bordered both sides of the long entrance road to the house. But the day's serenity did nothing to release the tight grip Jack had on the steering wheel or the clenched teeth that were beginning to worsen a headache that had been with him since mid-afternoon.
That's great too. I love the comparison of him to that car.
Yes, I have an Auburn car sitting on top of my desk in the back of here. We were able to find a little model of the car. They're just really beautiful convertibles, long slung cars.
I love the antique cars. I do have a passion for those as well, but I own a 1954 Ford truck instead.
Really good in Texas.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good farm truck.
Yeah.
Well, Sharon, as you mentioned earlier, we artists and novelists do not like to promote ourselves very well. Have you found any publicity that's worked for you or that didn't work?
Well, of course, with the first 2 books, the publishers had a targeted audience. And so that's really different from fiction. I have discovered that with fiction, you really have to do a lot of promotion. And so I have been doing a lot of book club talks here. Clarksville is a large city, over 200,000. It's the 5th largest city in Tennessee, and we're very close to Nashville. So I received a lot of publicity at the beginning about this book, partly because I was a teacher at Austin Peay, and so we did receive a lot of publicity about the book opening and so forth. So I've been asked to talk to several book clubs, to the Woodward Library Society. I'll be talking to the Public Library Society, the Women's Club, other podcasts, and getting the book into the Nashville area has been important with Parnassus Books there as the main feature. So that's what I've been doing so far. I have been putting a lot of things on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram, but my publisher is, and so she puts things on Instagram. So that's what I've been doing so far. We hope that it's going to work. The book is getting good reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, and I'm grateful for that. You never know when you write a book if anyone's going to want to read it, but I'm happy to say they seem to be wanting to read it at this point.
Well, I think all of us novelists have the desire to be in that particular bookstore in Nashville.
Yes. Well, I was happy to be there. My publisher has a good relationship with them, I think, and she is also an author, and so she has her books there as well. Shanna Thornton is her name, and so that certainly helped because I know how difficult it is to get a book into any bookstore. I had no idea until I wrote this book. I just was going along as if it were nonfiction. And, now I realize how much effort it takes and how much work you have to do in order to get there.
It really does. And I think all of us are surprised by how much publicity efforts we have to do because I was in public relations and marketing for most of my career, but promoting yourself is different. And I think even the big five publishers are requiring their authors to do most of the legwork.
Yes, that's what I hear from other people. The publishing industry has changed a lot. I will be talking at the Writers' Conference here. I've been invited to do that. The Clarksville Writers' Conference draws from a large area, and they bring in writers of all kinds. They've been going on for a number of years. I actually went to the Writers' Conference 3 times over the past 20 years, and that helped me to see a little bit about how to write fiction. And so I will be presenting this time for 2 days. So that I think that will be a good way to get the book out a little bit as well.
And I always try to remind writers who have debut novels out there that, we think we have to do everything in the first 6 months. And that's just not really true. Books are being discovered years after they've been on a shelf. So I think we still have time, even though we try to rush it.
Yes, I have felt that way. I'm very much a person who likes to get things done. So I'm always wanting to get to the end. But I think with this, yes, you're absolutely right. It takes a while for the book to get out there. And also I'm working on another book. And so I've been spending all of my time promoting this book, and I have to get back to the other book in order to do something with that one.
Well, that was my next question. If you had any other books in you, so tell us about it.
Well, they always tell you to write what you know, as I've said. And so my next book is quite different from this. It's about 2 singers who are friends. One is a mezzo-soprano, which I am, and one is a soprano. And they teach at a music conservatory, and they solve crimes. And I've called it the Diva Diaries. And so I'm about, I don't know exactly how far I am through the book. I've written maybe 7 chapters at this point, and don't really know exactly where it's going. The same was true with the book that I have out now. I sort of let it evolve and see where the characters want to go. But that's the book I'm working on now. I have written about 15 stories that I want to somehow publish in a collection. They're stories about my family and East Tennessee, and I came from a very eccentric family. And so there's lots of fodder there.
Well, that's wonderful. I come from a deep Southern family as well, and there is always something to tell about our families, isn't there?
There is, absolutely.
Speaking of family, does your family support your career as a writer? What do they think about you writing these novels now?
Well, my husband is very supportive. He is a musician as well. He's a conductor, and he is also a composer. And one of the things he did, as I said, one of the characters in this book is a musician in a bluegrass band and wants to be on the Grand Ole Opry in 1937. And so he had to have a song. So I asked my husband if I could print a bit of a song that he wrote a long time ago. He used to write shows for Opryland and for Silver Dollar City and other places. And so it was a song that he had never used in one of his shows, and it's called I Never Knew a Revenuer. And so I printed a couple of verses of that song in the book, but he went into the recording studio and we recorded the whole song. And so I have been playing that song at a couple of the talks that I give. I play it at the end, and they love the song. It's a real great bluegrass song. So if we do an audio book, it'll probably be in it.
I just love that. I love that you have your own composer right there in your home with you, because I had to pay to use a few lyrics of a couple of songs in both of my books that I thought fit in those books very well. So it's so nice that you have your own composer.
I do. And of course, he has written classical music. And on my last CD, I actually sang 2 song cycles that he wrote for me, as well as other music. But he writes beautiful music, whether it's classical or he can write bluegrass. So he's a very creative person. Yeah. So yes, he's very interested, and I'm an only child, and but he has brothers and sisters, and they've read the book and they love the book, and so my family is very supportive.
Well, that's wonderful, and I do think that you should use that music in your audiobook to start the intro and do the outro.
Yeah, it's a great idea, I think. The name of the character is Newgene, Newgene. And Newgene was a real character in my book, and he was a distant relative of my mother. His father's name was Gene, and when he was born, he said, there are a whole lot of Gene Juniors out there. Let's just call him Newgene. And so that's how he got that name. And only that could happen in East Tennessee.
Or in Mississippi. We have a family of juniors, so everybody is Little Bill or Little John or Little Joe, A lot of families with juniors and littles.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, there's so many quirks like that, that we can write about.
Yeah. Well, Sharon, as always, our last interview question is, our writers over 50 are a unique set. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
Don't wait 30 years to publish your first book. I did, and I think write about what you know and write about what you really love. I've done that in both areas. I wrote about music, which I love and spent 50 years doing. And now I'm writing about East Tennessee, which I absolutely love. When I crossed the plateau, I've lived in Middle Tennessee since '67, but when I go back to East Tennessee, I just exhale. I feel totally different when I see those Smoky Mountains. And so I had to write about East Tennessee.
Well, I love that too. And I do love those Smoky Mountains. We spent a lot of time there when I was a child, and I love to rest my eyes on one of those mountains.
Yes, it's wonderful in the fall. There's a sort of a purple color that comes over the mountains, and the smoky barns and the fried apple pies. I'm headed back that way in May. I try to go twice a year. Now that I'm retired, I may go more often, but I just have to get back to that area. It really is home.
Well, we just thank you so much for being with us today, and we're excited to say that you're now counted among our authors over 50.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.